Desert greening. Green wave in Africa. Desert greening shall make the desert fertile. Greening the desert is an old dream of the North Africans, which could now become reality, thanks to the desert greening project of the Algerian Madjid Abdellaziz. He uses near-natural technologies and has already achieved astonishing successes with them in the Algerian desert. Following on from his article Understanding Radioactivity, in the last issue of raum&zeit, Harald Kautz-Vella describes Abdelaziz's further plans, which could finally bring peace to the oppressed continent. By Harald Kautz-Vella, Prignitz. Djanan is a place in the south of Algeria, near Haouita, Laghouat. In Djanan, a settlement is being built, not one of the postmodern zero-emission cities, as they are being raised with oil money on the Arabian Peninsula. Djanan is the nucleus and the future center of an agricultural settlement area in which man and nature are to live in balance with each other, in a prosperity that grows directly from paradise-like garden landscapes. The buildings and housing estates are oriented on the golden section and unfold their space like the nautilus snail unfolds its shell. Basically, the whole thing should cost very little. Buildings are made with earth bags, nylon bags filled with earth, or with the natural stone that is produced when the soil is reclaimed. If one contrasts the lack of ideas and stylistic robber barons of post- and post-postmodern architecture, the lack of relationship of the blocks to their rural surroundings, one gets a feeling for their essence and scope of this regional development project. The story began in 2003, when the Algerian-born Madjid Abdellaziz, after studying engineering in Berlin, decided to tackle the rampant drought in Algeria with a private project. He did not use the school knowledge he had acquired at the Berlin University, but rather the private contacts with representatives of the new physics, which put him on the road to this project. While in Germany, researchers such as Nikola Tesla, Walter Russell, Wilhelm Reich, or Victor Schauberger are still regarded as the best ones, whose theories are after all not proven. Abdellaziz set about implementing and combining precisely their concepts with near-natural technologies. Madjid Abdellaziz, the Cloudbuster, the rainmaker instrument developed by Wilhelm Reich, needs running water or a large lake to be grounded. We don't have both in southern Algeria, so we take a small pool and revitalize the water freely according to Schauberger, with swirls and with pyramid geometry. Quote, "There is no need for long discussions about the method. The results speak for themselves. 30-meter increase in the groundwater level since 2004. A collapse in the price of the lion or desert truffle from 80 to 8 euros a kilogram. A lively microclimate within a radius of 150 kilometers. Clear nights, nature in bright colors, with a rather Mediterranean attitude to life. Occasional rains at the height of summer. Let's put it to the test. Between July 5th and 15th, weather operations with Reich technology were carried out in Djanan. Today is the 20th of July, 17 hours. Let's take a look at the weather in Haouita, the settlement closest to Djanan. Before the beginning of the celestial acupuncture, as Abdellaziz also calls it, in 2003, the region knew only this misty oppressive atmosphere at high pressure and the black door, or deadly organ clouds at low pressure, which in some years did not bring rain even in winter. True to the motto, nothing is more convincing than an invention that you use enthusiastically yourself. Djanan is a family project. Madjid Abdellaziz brought the technology to Algeria. The basic financing for the acquisition of the land rights came from the modest family fortune. The agriculture is run by the family of Maya Abdellaziz, his wife, who has her roots near Laghouat. Her niece, the 23-year-old architecture student Isra Bellamy, designed the architecture for the extended settlement project, which is primarily intended to create living space for the agricultural workers, but also to house a school for desert greening. The project was presented as a diploma thesis in mid-July and was accepted with distinction by the University of Laghouat. Weather manipulation with organ technology. The Austrian psychologist Wilhelm Reich discovered and researched the subtle life energy, which he called organ. In other times and cultures, it is known as chi, prana, or odd. Reich found that organ did not obey the law of entropy, but on the contrary, tended to concentrate, especially phase transitions of metal and insulator materials like glass, mineral, or cotton attract organ. Reich called the harmful variant of organ deadly organ, abbreviated DOR. When DOR accumulates in the atmosphere, there is no longer a natural flow of energy between heaven and earth. The consequences can be weather extremes like droughts. Reich's Oraner experiment became famous, in which he equipped an organ accumulator with radioactive radium and thus generated DOR. Numerous negative consequences, such as symptoms of radiation sickness in humans and a hazy gray veil in the sky, occurred. Conversely, the organ technology can also be used for integral environmental healing. The so-called cloudbuster, for example, an invention of Reich, sucks off DOR and conducts this energy into a water reservoir. Organ then flows in and improves the climate. Madjid Abdellaziz has demonstrated for all to see that this natural technology can be used to green the desert. The cloudbuster stimulates the natural energy flow between heaven and earth. Wilhelm Reich, 1897 to 1957, discoverer of the organ. Vastu in the desert. The university professors didn't need to know that the entire architecture is based on ancient Indian knowledge of sacred geometry. Officially, it's an ecological settlement project. Vastu is the Indian variant of Chinese feng shui, which is better known in this country, and refers to the ancient Vedic art of designing rooms and buildings in such a way that they have a positive, energizing effect. There are rooms for rest and contemplation, but also places of power and inspiration, all oriented on the golden section and perfected according to natural resonant sizes and lengths. The European master builders of the cathedral were the last in our country to pass on the ancient Vedic knowledge in their secret societies. For them, it was not only the feeling of holiness they wanted to breathe into their churches and cathedrals, but also a law of stability that could not be calculated with ordinary statistics, something that made the buildings last for centuries, in some cases, even millennia. The merging of old and new knowledge is typical of the whole project. Making rain according to Wilhelm Reich, water regeneration according to Schauberger, revitalization of the soil with Agnihotra, another old Vedic cultivation technique, in between elements of traditional agriculture, but also more recent developments like sonic bloom, where plants and seeds are refined with special tones, or methods of electrophysical growth acceleration. To date, several hectares of fruit tree plantations have been created, 1 hectare of vineyards, rows of casuarina trees as wind shelters, and in between, experiments with potatoes, wheat, lettuce, and artichokes. 2 wells were drilled for irrigation. A small dam was built to collect the abundant rainwater, preventing flooding and keeping the water ready for agriculture. And it's all organic, says Madjid Abdellaziz happily, knowing full well that the tribes in the south are unlikely to have heard that something like this is certified in other parts of the world and traded at high prices. They've noticed people still have a sense of quality food here. The potatoes at the markets were bigger, and yet they came to us. Cloudbuster and Cloud Stabilizer work as a team. The latter fixes the created microclimate and keeps it stationary. A mobile cloudbuster is used for operations that are to have a more expansive effect. After celestial acupuncture, an exotic-looking fractal field often unfolds in the sky. Agriculture and wild herbs in Djanan. In the background, you can see the first house built there, which accommodates the family of an agricultural worker. In the meantime, a 300 m2 barn has been added, where guests can also stay overnight. Celestial acupuncture. In 2003, the region knew only this misty, oppressive atmosphere at high pressure and the black door clouds at low pressure, which in some years did not even bring rain in winter. Africa, continent of the future. When Africa comes into the media, it is usually the most frightening thing. 13 million are threatened with starvation in East Africa. So far, 300,000 refugees, and officially 10,000 dead as a result of NATO's war against Libya. What is hardly visible through the glasses of the Western media is that here lies a birth process in the barrage of the Western elites. The birth of a rich, sparsely populated, innovative continent whose inexhaustible resources threaten to slip out of the control of the Western world. Oil as a motif is almost anachronistic here. Water and arable land are the coming motif, which has hardly been publicly addressed so far. Water and arable land are the coming motif. Libyan leader Gaddafi was on the verge of developing an underground freshwater reservoir the size of half of Europe, worth 58 trillion euros, and turning North Africa into a thriving continent. And this, what an affront! Without taking out a loan from the World Bank or hiring Western companies. What the European elites do not want to see, and the European public must not see, is that we Europeans are discrediting ourselves to the point of blood, even in the long term, with the gunboat policy that we practice. If the manipulation no longer works, and the principle of control escalates, the loss of control is very near. And after that, how wonderful it would have been if the overpopulated Europe, as a respected trading partner, had been able to cover its food requirements in the future in the greening Northern Sahara. To expect recognition of the sovereignty of other states, or at least some moderation from our increasingly paranoid power elites, would be risky. What we can do, however, is to weave the bond between the continents at the lower level. From the middle class and research to accompany the building forces on the Black Continent, and, perhaps an even greater lesson in humility, to learn from them. This is our power. Put your money in the sand. There is something else that makes a mockery of our growth-oriented way of life, which ultimately only leads to ever faster decay: the construction costs. To have a bungalow built in Djanan costs 25,000 euros, and that's only because some quality of life has to be imported. The shell itself consists of a roll of nylon bags, a roll of barbed wire, earth, and a shovel load of clay and sand for the plaster. Earth bag building is the name of the construction method developed by Kaki Hunter and Donald Kiffmeyer. These buildings are designed for a lifespan of 400 years and are earthquake-proof due to the dome construction method. The construction technique, says the American Kaki Hunter in the book Earth Bag Building, in which the entire know-how with detailed instructions is published, was developed on the premise that building should be fast and above all fun. The thickness of the walls ensures a pleasantly cool indoor climate, which in the desert buffers the strong temperature differences between day and night, while the clay content of the walls pleasantly humidifies the air. The architecture thus created appears to be a perfect synthesis of Arabic, cubist-like elements in the round, African huts that are particularly familiar from West Africa. Put your money in the sand, says Madjid Abdellaziz. Then you can't lose it. This offer is simply unconventional as the entire construction project. After all, buying a bungalow, as currently offered by Desert Greening, does not make anyone the owner of the same. A lifelong right of residence is granted and a possibility to lock away private property for periods of absence. Otherwise, the ensemble is to be used collectively so that the buildings can be used in the meantime to house volunteers and students of the planned Desert Greening School. Isra Belalmi presents her thesis on the architectural concept of Djanan. On her right, her mother, Professor Fatima Belalmi. On the far right, her aunt Dr. Maya Abdellaziz, the wife of Madjid Abdellaziz. Isa Belalmi is looking forward to her work as an architect for the Djanan project. Models of the administration building, above, and a bungalow, below, in Djanan. The predominant form is the fractal spiral, which according to the ancient teachings of the Indian Vastu, serves to attract and concentrate life energy. The organic forms of Djanan's architecture are to be created predominantly in earth bag construction. Nylon bags are suspended in a frame at 20-centimeter intervals, filled with clay from above and then pressed tight. Clay as well as raffia or wire mesh are also used for the upper plaster. All of them inexpensive materials. The green wave. Up to now, there is only a small farm for a family, a big barn for tools, and some rooms for guests. Plans for the school, an administration building, as well as yards for a few more families who are to manage the steadily growing plantations have been drawn up and are waiting to be realized with the help of donations. But the vision behind Djanan is much bigger. Madjid Abdellaziz, who sees himself personally responsible for the weather work, plans to draw a green belt across North Africa, initially through a chain of enclaves, which later, similar to Djanan, will merge into a green wave according to their natural growth from Morocco to the Arabian Peninsula. Migrant workers in the Maghreb countries or inhabitants of large cities like Cairo are to be attracted, for example. But also refugees from Central Africa, people who are currently being interned in camps near the coast or who risk their lives in fishing boats on their way across the Mediterranean Sea, could be attracted to a new home. If you want to create something big, says Madjid Abdellaziz, you have to bring something small into the world, but one that is capable of growing out of itself. And it seems that the governments of the affected countries are also slowly opening up to the possibilities of natural desert greening. Negotiations are currently underway with the United Arab Emirates. A first cloudbuster ensemble was built in Abu Dhabi in June against payment of the costs by Madjid Abdellaziz in order to see how strong the weather blockade over the Arabian Peninsula is. After 2 weeks, a dense field of clouds moved over the peninsula from the Indian Ocean, bringing at least some drizzle during the night. Impressive enough for the season as a whole to persuade Abdul Jalil, the head of the State Forestry Office Barari, to continue negotiations. And there, in the rich oil countries, there is no spillage. Abdul Jalil hopes for a comprehensive reforestation of the emirate. With Abu Dhabi, the other end of the green wave would be marked, says Madjid Abdellaziz happily. But there is still a lot of work in between. Harald Kautz-Vella works as a technology scout and specialist journalist for innovative methods in the fields of energy, physical medicine, and agriculture. The latter since 2010, with his own experimental areas on his farm in the Prignitz.